Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone. This is the Select Board meeting of Wednesday, November 10th, 2021. This meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, signed by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. My name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the board. Could we all please introduce ourselves? You're on mute, Arthur. You're on mute, Arthur. Get your introduction.
Arthur Doyle, Vice Chair.
Mike Zula, Secretary.
Melinda Collins, member.
And our town administrator.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Dennehy, I'm Town Administrator.
And we're also joined by Linda Napoli, the board's executive administrative assistant, and members of the Board of Assessors who are up for an item early in the agenda. We'll start with saying the Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone would please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
United States of America,
And to the
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
Visible,
liberty,
liberty,
with
and
liberty.
justice for all. Thank you, everyone. The first item on our agenda is public comment. If we have anyone this evening for public comment, please indicate by using the raised hand function at the bottom of your screen. I see no one on the telephone lines, so other than the town clerk. So we'll wait a few more seconds. If there is anyone here for public comment this evening, please raise your hand and we'll recognize you to speak. Okay, seeing none, then we'll go on to the first item. And we already have the chair of the Board of Assessors, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Bushway, the chief appraiser, with us to discuss the property tax classification. So welcome to the Select Board. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Would you like to
so.
start either
Well-
Mr. Bennett or Mr. Bushway we have your package and your materials, but would you like to give us an update?
I
Sure,
think-
great. I'll just give you a quick, just a quick overview of, what we're here for. Obviously, we do this every year, the tax classification hearing. And that's pursuant to Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Mass General Laws. It requires the Select Board to make policy decisions regarding the property tax burden to be borne by each property, residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal in the town of Milton. The changes to this year's assessed values, they're all based on sales in the calendar year 2020, as well as new houses and any renovations to existing properties that have taken place, which we all know is new growth for anybody who watched or participated in our most recent town meeting. So the valuation from new growth was nearly $66 million this past year, which was an increase to the tax base of a little bit over $950,000. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, the residential property values in the town continued at record highs. There was low inventory and high demand, and near record low interest rates for mortgages has resulted in the assessed value of a single family home increasing over 8%. From $760,000 to just under $825,000. Obviously, because of the issues with COVID, the commercial sector was severely impacted by the pandemic, and several small businesses, many in Milton, were severely impacted for several months in 2020, resulting in vacancies and loss of rental income. So the commercial property values fell to almost down almost 7%. So for the fiscal year 2022, our new allowable tax levy will be $91,386,985, which is a 3.6% increase. So I'm going to turn it over to Bob Bushway, our chief appraiser, to delve into this a little bit more. And if anybody has any questions at the end, we'll gladly answer them for you.
Thank you. Mr. Bushway.
Thank you, Bill. So, yeah, basically probably no surprises as far as the valuations go. Everybody realizes what the market has done. I don't know if it's in spite of the pandemic or because of the pandemic, but values since I've been here, I haven't seen them increase this quickly, and days on market is very low, and actually the sale price is oftentimes over the asking price. So it's extraordinary. So this year, what we had to do is, increase them due to the market, increase the single family properties, which is the majority of the properties in town. And then, as Bill had mentioned, the commercial sector took a pretty big hit in 2020 because of the pandemic. So, that's just the nature of the beast. We track sales, we track commercial properties and vacancies and things of that nature. So residential class is going up, the commercial class of values are going down. The average single, if the select board votes the recommendation of the Board of Assessors, the average single family tax bill will increase about 3.2%. And Mike, do you have the presentation that you can put up? I think if you go down to the third page.
Okay.
So yeah, this is good. So right now, if you look at the top there, that first column, the current FY21, our residential, we use the 1.52 shift currently in FY21. Now the residential rate's $13.13 per thousand. Commercial rate's $20.41. Shows the average single family tax of $99.68. And the average commercial tax, actually that's the average assessed value. But in any event, what I'd like to, what the board is recommending is to go with option 1, which is a 1.5 shift. Would actually bring the residential tax rate down about 65 cents, 5% reduction. And would also bring the commercial tax rate down significantly, over $1. So what the net result on that, as I said, the average is, it shows a 3.2% increase on the average single family tax and a reduction of over 12% on the average commercial tax. And that's the fact that the tax rate's going down, and as well as their valuation. So that's the recommendation of the board. Any other options would be a further reduction, a further increase to the residential class and of the average single family tax bill. And it would keep bringing the average commercial tax down as well. So that's really sums it up basically. By going with a shift in the tax rate, the average single family taxpayer saves about a little over $220 as opposed to a single tax rate. Single tax rate would be $12.75. So by sticking with a shift, it's a significant savings to the average single family taxpayer. And then the next block shows the increase of 8.6% for the average single family value and a reduction of about 6.5% on the commercial value. And then the last block is just basically a history of tax rates and tax shifts. So that just about sums it up. At the bottom is the recommendation or the vote that the select Board of Assessors is recommending to the select board. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, this next page just summarizes the options or the decisions that the select board needs to make. There's the residential factor, which is what the board will vote tonight. The residential exemption, which the town of Milton really doesn't, the way the makeup of the town goes, it doesn't really work out too well. It's a reduction on the reduction of owner occupied properties, shifting the burden to rental properties, etc. It's most popular on a lot of Cape towns. The city of Boston has it due to all the rental properties that the city has, but most suburban communities don't adopt this residential exemption. Then there's the small commercial exemption, which shifts some of the burden off the small commercial taxpayer. But again, it's not a very popular small commercial exemption. Only about 10 out of 351 cities and towns take advantage of it. And especially this year, the commercial class is getting a pretty significant reduction in their taxes due to the pandemic. So the town of Milton has never adopted those two exemptions. So at the very bottom here, we've got the recommendation from the board with the vote of a residential factor, which is that 0.9781, which represents the 1.5 shift that we are recommending this year.
Thank you, Mr. Bushway. Does any member of the board have a question or a comment? Discussion. If not, do we have a motion? Mr. Zulus?
Madam Chair, thank you very much to Bob and Bob. I'm sorry, Bob and Bill. Bob and Bill. The key points of this, just so I understand, the recommendation is to reduce the tax rate by about 5%, the tax rate. The average tax burden to the residents will increase by about 3.2%, but that's purely driven by the increase in property value. Is that fair to say, or no?
No, it's
Okay.
driven really by the tax levy.
Okay.
Because the levy is going up 3.6%. So the town budget's increasing 3.6%. So the rising property values is dropping the tax rate, but it's just a math computation. At the end of the day, the tax increase is a result of the tax levy going up 2.5%.
Tax levy going up. Okay.
2.5% plus new growth and plus the debt exclusion. That's your 3.6% increase on the tax levy.
Got it. But this option one would represent the lowest increase or the smallest increase for the residents, for the residential tax burden.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
There are several charts that I put together. We don't have to go through them all tonight, but I will put them up on the town website, and it shows various. It shows the history of the tax increases over the years. Yeah, thank you. This first one shows. You can see the override we had back in 2018 increased the average bill by 7.4%. But you can see the other years they trend between 3 and 4% on the average single family taxpayer. And that's a direct result of the tax levy. Next is the sources of revenue, showing that property taxes make up about 78% of the town budget, other revenue sources, motor vehicle excise, local receipts, etc. This is the tax levy as a percentage of the town budget as compared to other communities. And you can see Milton is at 70, just under 78%. And there's several other towns. I took a sample of Norfolk County towns between with similar population sizes. And you can see Needham and Wellesley have the highest percentage, the tax levy as a percentage of the town budget. And Norwood is the smallest, interestingly enough. They have a very large commercial tax base.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Any further discussion, or would anyone like to offer a motion? The not adopting a residential exemption or a small commercial exemption, as everyone knows, is consistent with board's practice in recent years.
Madam Chair, I move that the town of Milton adopt a minimum residential factor of 0.9781, not to adopt a residential exemption and not to adopt a small commercial exemption.
Second,
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. All right.
I am here, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wells.
I apologize for being tardy.
I'm sorry. No, I
Covering
didn't
two
say-
meetings tonight. I vote yes.
Okay, great, unanimous. All right, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't see that you had joined the meeting, Mr. Wells. Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett and Mr. Bushway. Appreciate your being here tonight. Thanks for all of your work on putting this
You're
material.
welcome. Thank
you,
you very
everybody.
much. I'd like to just wrap up, if I could, just to say my thanks to the Board of Assessors, the Chairman, Bill Bennett, who's with us tonight, as well as Brian Cronin and Bob Reitz. They've been very supportive. And my staff, especially Nancy Shibley and Curtis Ross, they do phenomenal work, and they make me look good. So I appreciate their help.
Thank you, Mr. Bushway. Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Clerk, I echo Mr. Bushway's sentiments, but I also add him to that category. 2 Fridays ago, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bushway spent well over 2 hours at the Council on Aging informing some of our senior residents about all things tax in Milton. It was a very, very productive and robust discussion, very well attended, many questions and many answers. So thank you to Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bushway, the entire staffs and Board of Assessors.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Mike. Pleasure doing it. It was a
Thank you
great
very
time.
much.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, I should mention at the start of the meeting, we have 2 items that are not ready for action this evening. The first one is item 10, which relates to 2 Granite Avenue, the LED billboard installation. So I see that there are some additional attendees who have joined. If anyone has joined us just for that item, that we're going to need to defer that. Attorney Corcoran is representing the owner of that property and is not available to join us this evening. So we've tentatively put it on for the November 17th agenda. So if the board is agreeable, we'll defer item 10. Item 12, Mr. Dennehy and I can give an update on those contracts, but the contracts themselves are not ready and the board has not seen them. Town council is working on those with the engineering companies and also with the attorney for the Animal League. So we can give a brief update on item 12, but those will not be available to be acted upon this evening. So I just wanted to let anyone who was here for those items know if that's agreeable to everyone.
Yes.
Okay, the next item is item 5 regarding the legal boundary descriptions of the voting precincts, and our town clerk Susan Galvin has joined us. This is a follow-up discussion to the re-precincting that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So welcome Susan Galvin to the meeting. Thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me. Ooh, hold on one second.
Madam
Can you
Clerk
hear
was
me?
having, yes.
Oh,
Go ahead.
good. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's much
Um,
better. Thank you.
I apologize. Thank you for having me back. It's not a thing I wanted to have to come back, but I guess since I'm here, I will explain as to why I get to see all these lovely faces again. In the legal boundary descriptions, there were some minor text corrections that had to take place. The map hasn't changed, and the general descriptions haven't changed. We just had to indicate non-visible boundaries that were in the actual legal description. So that has been rectified. And so I beg your forgiveness and ask that you revote on the packet.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Does anyone have a question for the town clerk regarding this matter or any discussion? If not, we have a proposed motion. And let me ask, Susan, does this need to be submitted is it a time-sensitive basis to get this in to the state?
I will need to resubmit. You will need to sign the same document given today's date and resubmit it to the state. So if you folks could sign that document and provide it to me at your earliest convenience.
Okay, okay, thank you. Any discussion? And if not, do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move that the town of Milton legal boundary descriptions of voting precincts be adopted as proposed.
Second.
Okay. And this vote tonight that we take is going to supersede the vote of the board on October 27th concerning the re-precincting plan for the town. Any discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
is
Mr.
there any
Wells?
chance this will be ready for us to sign after the Veterans Day services tomorrow?
Well, town hall
I
is
can
closed.
make that available.
Okay,
Okay.
Mr. Jennings says he can make
Yeah.
it.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
okay, then all in favor? Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes,
and myself, yes. All right, thank you all, and thank you to Susan Galvin.
Thank you again.
Have a good night, Susan.
You too.
Okay, item 6 is a just report from the Finance Committee and discussion on the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funding. I see that the town accountant, finance director, Karen Paval, has also joined us, so we may want to move Karen up to be a panelist. Mr. Zulus, shall we turn this over to you?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Finance Committee met last Friday and was joined by Caroline Kinsella, our Health Director, Jim McAuliffe, our Treasurer, members of the School Committee and School Administration, our DBW Director, Mr. Berkeley, and Karen, obviously, and Maria Fernandez from our engineering department, along with Superintendent Jett and Assistant Superintendent Dexter, and school committee members Rose Marin, White, and Ross Denny. I think I have everyone who was there. And it was to once again discuss the ARPA projects. We discussed the school projects. I think this board heard about the school projects last week. And on Friday, we heard from Caroline Kinsella about the health department projects. We've all received the priorities from the health department for that. The primary priority being the first priority being the part-time nurse. I believe that's the priority. Mike Denny.
Would you like me to display that?
Yeah, that sure. And I don't believe those priorities have changed since Friday. We all had the sheet today. And I will add that as we think about these projects for potential funding, there is also money that is being appropriated by the state legislature ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. And in that appropriation, and they're appropriating, I think the state is appropriating about 3.5 billion, I believe. Representative Driscoll has offered amendment, I think that passed the House for 250,000 for municipal broadband. And then Senator Timilty has offered amendments for the Milton School building HVAC improvements, which you may remember from last week. He offered an amendment for that for 350,000. For the Council on Aging staffing, the amount of 68,000. For broadband access as well, I believe it was really focused on the iNet for $250,000, the same amount as the amendment offered by Representative Driscoll. For the community health assessment, which is on this list, not the top priority, but is on this list for the health department, and Brooksfield's improvement, another 100,000. So those amendments are being, I guess, debated now. Senator Timilty is involved, I guess, in moving forward with those amendments tonight. And my understanding before our meeting is that those amendments are still alive. So it may be premature for us to allocate money or appropriate money tonight for those areas, because there's a possibility that we could get state funding for that. And allocate money in other areas. So with that in mind, you'll see that on the health department, the number one priority is for continued staffing for the health department's part-time nurse. And I believe, Mike, and you'll correct me, I believe this is, my notes indicate that this is for next year, or starting in January, I believe.
Correct.
And then the second priority is for per diem contact traces, because the state provision of contract traces is going to be ending. And so that is the second priority for the health department. And then scrolling backward, the third priority is community tracing. Again, that's something that we've had, but that funding is going to stop. And so this would continue that. The next priority is for the vaccination clinics, and for nursing and EMT for the vaccination clinics. And I believe the hope for those would be, these are set up for the boosters. So this is as I understand it, a short-term need. And then, so more on the immediate side. And then scrolling up, the next two priorities. The next priority is that community health assessment that has been described as very important, and then finally the social worker to help with social, emotional, and mental health issues in the town. So those are the priorities of the health department. I think we've certainly heard those, and we have all the materials on that. We also had the presentation from the DPW, and Mike, I don't know if you have that too, but there are projects in the DPW totaling about $4 million, and two of the projects that we focused on in finance were two projects that are stormwater projects, that are projects for which interest would be at market rate, as opposed to the 0% interest for MWRA projects. And so those two projects were the Harlan Street culvert and the Algerine corner, I believe. I think that's right, Mike, unless that's changed. And I had those, the Harlan Street culvert at about 80,000 and the Algerine at about 111,500. And I don't know if there's the.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct, Mike. Yeah.
The
I have
Harlan
it up on
Street-
the screen here, just so you can see it. The Algerine corner piece, a large portion of that is being picked up by a grant that previous environmental coordinator, Eric De Donato, sought and received from the state. And then there's a design planning stage for the Harlan Street culvert here, and that's the $80,000 that you mentioned.
Right. And the Algerine, is that on this list too, Mike? Is that the
It is, yeah.
handheld? Is that, I had that at 111,500, but I don't know if that's been updated. Is that the 350?
It's here. Hang on one second. It's here somewhere. Algerine. Bear with me 1 second. Sorry.
I'm looking at a different one that has the 111,500. And it
Okay, let
has
me see if I
an
can.
orange column and a green column, if that's at all helpful.
This process is ongoing. So some of these spreadsheets have changed. So Mike, yours may be the more updated one from Friday.
I have the 111,500 as well, Mike.
Right, and the date on this particular spreadsheet is the 5th.
Yep, that was Friday when we met.
This is the one. Thank you, Ms. Collins. You'll see the two projects here. Here's the 111.5 that Member Zulus mentioned. It's a shovel-ready project for Algerine Corner, as well as the $80,000 down below here for Howland Street. Those were the two shovel-ready priorities from the Public Works Department.
And those are the two, again, those are the two that I think, fair to say, Arthur, you can jump in, that we kind of focused on because of the interest rate. You know, we'd pay market rate interest if we were to bond those projects, any MWRA projects, because they're stormwater projects, any MWRA water projects or sewer projects, we could finance at 0% interest. So that's the DPW. And then I think, and I'll get a little confused about which meetings which presentations have been at which meeting, but I think at last Wednesday, this board saw the schools presentation with the top four, with the four listed priorities, the grouped priorities.
Yes.
Which were the social emotional learning, the school nursing support, and then the enhanced expanded educational support. The ventilation projects, again, Senator Timilty has put in an amendment for that. That's more of a real hard project, a hard asset project. And then we have their priorities there. So, and then we also had in, although we hadn't talked about it, finance, I think we've had a request come in from the cemetery that we haven't talked about at finance. So the bottom line is that there are going to be decisions for this board to make. We have DPW projects totaling about $4 million. We have a total request from the school of about $2.5 million. We have the broadband committee is seeking $950,000 for that project. Although again, if we can get some on the state side, that may lessen that amount. And then the health department, the total of that request, if we were to fund all of it, I don't remember, but I don't remember what that full amount is, but it is significant.
It was about 211,000 for the first year and 171,000 for each of the next 2 years.
Right. So we're talking about, that's right. So we're talking about there, more than $500,000 for the health department. So, and right now our total is $8 million roughly from the direct funding and the little north of $8 million for the direct funding and for the county funding, of which we have already appropriated $1 million for the sewer project in August. What the finance committee is, and Arthur, you can jump in, I think is committed to doing, is to coming up with a kind of a global recommendation based on the timing and the different projects, and maybe holding some back depending on how things will change. But for this board, either tonight or perhaps next week, this board may want to move forward on some of the more time-based or time-sensitive needs. For example, the health department needs, and the social emotional needs in the schools. I think that is a short-term need. If we're talking about getting people on board in January, then to fill those positions and those needs, I think that would be fair to say is more of a time sensitive. And we have shovel ready projects on the DPW side. So there are some time sensitive projects that we could go ahead and approve. I'm happy to have a discussion tonight if the board. I'd be happy to have a discussion tonight if the consensus of the board is we should try to move forward tonight, or we could. The finance subcommittee could try to come up with a proposal, short-term proposal for next Wednesday. I think if we did it by next Wednesday, that might meet the timing needs of the health department and the schools. But we need to move forward on that. I think the most time-sensitive needs are, and Mike, you can correct me, and Arthur, are probably on the health department side for the nurse and the contract tracers. That's what I took from finance. And then secondarily, I think, the schools, I think that we're talking about January, but they need to get started if they're going to hire someone. And then the DPW with our shovel-ready projects. So, Arthur, please fill in with the.
I think that's a fair assessment. And we had, as I recall, concluded that we would recommend a funding of the health department's priorities 1, 2, and 3. You've identified the others, so I would propose, Mike, that we start with the health department. And priority 1 was the part-time nurse. Priority 2 is the per diem contact tracers. And priority 3 is the per diem contract tracers as the partners in healthcare CTT is standing down. We want to check the amounts on that. If we're going with the maximum amount on priority 3, the $50,745, we would have a total recommended appropriation for priorities 1, 2, and 3, as recommended by the Board of Health, of $98,501, according to my calculation.
And
I stand to be corrected by either you or Mike.
yeah, and I think that's right, Arthur. And just to elaborate just a bit, the priority 1 is $29,432. Priority
Right.
2, the contractor is $18,324, and the priority 3, this is the contact tracers, the per diem contract tracers, and the estimate is on the minimum side $16,915, and on the maximum $50,745. And my only concern if we appropriate the full amount under ARPA, is there an issue with not fully funding? In other words, clawing the money back. In other words, and so I wonder if on that one we should do kind of an ongoing appropriation rather than appropriate the full amount, so that we don't get into a situation where we've appropriated 50 and they only use 25 or 30. Whereas if we appropriate the minimum now, and then Caroline could come back and say, well, now I've hit my minimum, I need the next tranche. So that would be my only suggestion.
To that point, I have some questions and comments on the Board of Health, but I see that both Richard and Melinda have their hands raised. So why don't we go to Richard first and then to Melinda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. just for the purpose of discussion, am I correct? Are we able to vote on this tonight? Are we able to vote on the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
Yeah, the agenda does have this for potential approval, and we do list the health department.
So, Madam Chair, based on the recommendation of the Finance Committee, I'm like, just for the purpose of discussion, make a motion to approve this.
For what, Mr. Wells? Because there's 6 or 7 priorities, and 3 that have been identified by Mr. Doyle and Mr. Zulus. I have some questions and comments. Mr. Zulus has just said he thinks a partial fulfillment of the request, so I'm not sure what, can you just clarify what the motion is? You're on mute, Richard, if you're speaking.
Sorry, Madam Chair. So given that, I'll wait till we're done.
Okay. Do you have anything else before we go to Melinda?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, you're now on mute.
Thank you. We're talking about the money that we're receiving directly. Is that correct? We're not talking about applying through the county for the health department. Is that, do I understand that?
Was there a finance committee recommendation on that? Are we talking right now about the town funding rather than the county funding?
So, Madam Chair, the Finance Committee did not make a recommendation. We didn't have a vote on this. And have not made a recommendation. What we agreed to do was to have the discussion here tonight, given the time sensitivity of some of the health department requests, particularly the first 2, and I think that at least partially the third. Perhaps what we could do is, again, if the board's comfortable with it, is move forward on the first 2, and then maybe Ms. Kinsella could come in with a more refined ask for the third, and we could dig deeper and find out whether it would work if it's done in tranches rather than just one appropriation. So that's, I think, one way that we could move forward on this.
Thank you. I'm asking because I've only gone to a couple of, maybe it was only one, I don't know, of the county webinars when they were starting to plan how they would do this. And they did say that if a municipality ended up not being able to use the full amount that they were granted, to please let the county know, because they would reallocate it somewhere else. So I think I think that it's possible to do something in, as you say, tranches. But I would be, I can't imagine why we couldn't fund sort of the minimum amount, and then have Caroline Kinsella come back in. But I understand if other people don't feel comfortable, or actually our finance director is here. Maybe she can answer that question about whether if we found we needed more help, and it was more than the minimum 16,000 or so, could we go back again? Thank you.
I'll recognize Ms. Praval if she wants to answer that question. Or Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, if I might, yeah, and this is very good discussion. Again, to Mr. Zulus and Mr. Doyle's point, there were a bunch of presentations last week. The ARPA funds that have come directly from the U.S. Treasury, that half of the 2.888 million. The treasurer set up an account in Rockland Trust. There's currently a balance of $444,000 on that. I don't think it is out of the realm of accounting for us to draw on that as needed with journal entries, where we literally debit that account or credit that account each time we draw from it. The Norfolk County project is a little more arduous, if you will, at this point in time. In fact, the funding that we requested and formally submitted an application for last week, after this board recommended the Parks and Recreation software that process needs to be approved formally by this board signing an application, a grant application agreement, not necessarily for the funding that we requested, that specific project, but a general agreement. That paperwork came over today, so that will be on the agenda next week. So the long story is what I just said. The short story is I think we can draw upon the $444,000 sitting in a Rockland Trust bank account as needed.
And Ms. Praval, did you want to add anything?
I did. So as we approve projects out of the US Treasury money, I'm setting up separate budget codes. So as we had the $1 million approved for the water infrastructure, a budget code is set up. There are reports that I will have to send to the Treasury's office showing what we're spending. We just haven't received any additional information on that reporting. I'll be looking into that in the next couple of weeks, but they will start having deadlines in terms of money that has been spent. We paid the first invoice on that project, believe it was today.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zulus?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, I think the better course here is to seek the funding from the county first to the extent that we can. If we have money in the bank, I think we should if we have the opportunity to get money from the county, we should explore and go down that avenue first, and keep the money in the bank that we have that doesn't require us to go through the process. Now maybe the timing isn't, and so if we have a short-term project that is time sensitive, we'll have that money, we can draw on it, as Mike said, we can draw down on it. Whereas if we have a project that we can get approved by the county, and we have the time to get a project approved by the county, then we'll preserve those funds in the account. So I would tend towards going to the money in the county first and preserving those funds that are a little bit easier to allocate and appropriate.
Mr. Doyle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just note on what Mike has indicated that the county application funds have to be applied for and distributed by quarter over a period of time. So we would need in the Finance Committee meeting that we can tighten up some of that as we come to the Select Board, an identification of the timing for the application of those fundings. In the instance of the request of the Board of Health and our inclination to go with priorities 1 and 2, that total, which I have, is $47,757.25, represents only about 10% of the $444,000 that we have in the direct funding. So I would recommend for, in this instance, for the Board of Health, that we use that funding source, and then that we look at the county monies after we have the agreement with the county that Mike Dennehy identified a little while ago for the funding requests coming from the DPW and the Milton Public Schools.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doyle. Is there anything else on this point about the source? I have a comment and a question on the substance of the Board of Health request, but in terms of where we're seeking the funding from, anything further on that? Okay, then I guess, so my question for the Finance Committee is, and maybe the Finance Committee might be in a better position to respond to this next week, or maybe you are tonight, but I'm fine with priority number 1, which is increasing for the remainder of the current fiscal year, starting in January, 26 weeks, the additional hours for the part-time nurse. The question I have about priority 2 is it's contemplating contact tracing for 52 weeks. And we don't know we're going to be 26 weeks from now, 52 weeks from now. It's short dollars. We're only talking $18,000, but we have a lot of requests from a lot of departments. And someone mentioned that the cemetery sent over a request today. So my inclination would be to see whether that's something we could either do quarterly or half a year, so that we're not committing to 52 weeks of contact tracing if we don't think it's really going to be, we don't know. It may or may not be needed come next March or June or July. And I'd rather not commit the funds to it and then be in a position where we're looking to claw it back. For priority 3, I guess the request there is 32 weeks rather than 52 weeks. And it's additional contact tracers. So maybe all of this is needed. I'm just wondering if the health department could give us a little more background on, are we using all of the full hours that are being sought here currently? And as we go through more and more people getting vaccinated, the boosters, if we don't have another wave in the winter, where are we going to be in the spring? Are we then going to be in a position where we're wishing we had spent some of the money on a capital item or infrastructure or something else rather than this? I'm fine with doing some of it now. I think we should do it in stages so that other than priority 1, I'd like to see us consider priorities 2 and 3 in stages so that we're not committing to something now that may not be needed. And maybe you can provide more information than what I currently have just from reading the report. Mr. Zulus.
I was just going to say, Madam Chair, perhaps if we move forward on priority 1 tonight and then seek in our next Finance Committee meeting a little more color on the timing for priorities 2 and 3, and come back with a timed recommendation from the Health Department, then we could take that up next week. I don't think we lose anything for next week unless Mr. Dennehy tells me differently on priorities 2 and 3. So
You're on point. You're on point.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if we don't lose anything on priorities 2 and 3, if we move forward on them next week, perhaps we move forward on priority 1 tonight, get more color on the timing for priorities 2 and 3 prior to next week's meeting, and then take action at that time.
Okay, and before we go to Ms. Preval, to that point, I think we should also ask the Finance Committee to look at priority 4, because the vaccination clinics that are being requested, to me, sounds like it's a priority. And if we're projecting 32 weeks or 52 weeks for priorities 2 and 3, and we can do a smaller amount, maybe we wrap priority 4 into what's currently approved in lieu of part of priority 2. So that's something for the Finance Committee to consider. Ms. Preval.
I just wanted to mention that with the new expenses that we're looking at for contact tracing, just talking with FEMA, those expenses are no longer eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So there could be expenses that were rejected by CARES that we now have to go to FEMA that may no longer be eligible for FEMA if they involve contact tracing. So I just wanted to let everyone know that there could be additional expenses that we've already incurred that are no longer eligible to be reimbursed through FEMA. So as I start preparing that documentation, then I'll keep the committee updated on if there are additional expenses that they're no longer covered.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this Board of Health request or any of the other ARPA requests?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Doyle.
In light of Karen's commentary, I'm wondering if we shouldn't follow your advice and use a part of priority 2, just so that we have the base covered. And we don't lose timing. I don't know if Karen has any advice on that.
We have the 2 pots of money that are eligible. So the money that we had from the U.S. Treasury, the 444,000 is already there. We don't have to send a request to the county, but then, we can all, I just we could also send it to the county as well.
Okay, so we could act pretty quickly on this. So with that being the case, Madam Chair, I would move approval of the priority one request from the Board of Health for seeking funds to continue paying the health department's part-time nurse.
Second.
And that would be from the town funds or the seeking.
This will be from the 440,000, the direct funds
Okay.
from the federal government. Yes, good catch.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, then all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes,
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes,
Mr. Wells,
Yes, ma'am.
and myself, yes. Okay, Mr. Zulus.
Just, Madam Chair, what I would ask the board to do in advance of next week is to consider being ready to vote on some additional projects such as perhaps the schools, short-term needs, the social emotional health needs, and the DPW shovel-ready projects as well. And we'll also know more by next week on what's happening with the legislature and whether we'll get some of those amendments that have been filed by Senator Timilty and by Representative Driscoll, whether we'll get some funding there. So I just asked the board to put it on the agenda for next week we may want to make some, I think we probably should make some decisions about short-term funding at next week's meeting.
Okay, so I think it's essentially the same agenda item that we would carry forward as item 6. And I agree with you that the short-term needs, the mental health needs in particular for the schools, as well as the Eldering Corner and the other shovel-ready project at Harlan Street are ripe for discussion and I think would make good use of the funds. And Mr. Doyle has his hand raised. Mr. Doyle.
thanks, Madam Chair. Mike Zulus, recognizing timing being what it is, we would need a date for the Finance Committee meeting.
Right, I think we couldn't do Friday because of we ran out of time, so I think we'll try to post for early next week. Is that where we are on that?
If we post tomorrow, we could get Tuesday morning, 8 AM or Wednesday morning, 8 AM.
So Arthur, we can work, either one of those is fine with me, and we can post for one of those days, depending on your schedule.
Sorry, Mike, when tomorrow's the holiday, if I posted Friday morning, Wednesday would be the earliest available, so I'm thinking Wednesday at 8 AM.
If we posted Friday, it's Monday and then Tuesday, right? Well, I guess it'd have to be posted early Friday, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
More than likely Wednesday.
Right.
I'm good on Wednesday.
Sorry about that.
All right, Wednesday it is.
Okay, good.
Wednesday it is.
Then we can bring a tighter recommendation into the select board meeting.
Okay, so are we finished with item 6 or is there anything else? I think we're finished.
Yes, Madam Chair, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Then we're on to number 7, which is a report from the accounting department headed by Karen Praval, the finance director / town accountant. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Praval.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank you and the board for allowing me the opportunity to discuss an option and a proposal for digitizing our current warrant book process. So currently the town has invested in ClearGov. It's a financial software database that's we use for a public facing section. If you go onto the website, you can see all of our expenditures, you can see our revenue. This is another component of ClearGov. What it is this software will automate the warrant document creation process. It's easy to build, it's interactive. There's a digital version for online readings. I think what the unique feature with this software that it allows each committee or board, department head to have access to update their particular article within the warrant. You can set permissions. It also allows for visual. So at some point, as we look at demographics, if you look at visuals, if you want to, kind of paint the picture for the town of what the town is actually doing, where you can see before and after pictures of construction projects. You can, see financial charts that are separated by category, by function, by department. At some point, if you wanted to include information on departments, as we start looking at goals, looking at benchmarking, this particular software allows you to do that. And then it also, I've been working closely with Lynn Hoy, and we were able to test the software. What this allows you to do is it prints, it's a little different than the current warrant that prints on a 6x9. It does print on 8.5 by 11, but allows you the opportunity to update a document where the formatting is consistent throughout the entire document. And I think it allows you to have a little more efficiency in terms of putting the document together. As I was saying before, every committee that has an article that they need to update, they would have access to update that one particular article. If you wanted to have read only access, members of the select board have read only access, so you could see the progress of the entire warrant at any particular time period. They do have, there was, just due in light of the number of articles in on this agenda, there is a 5-minute video that I link that I can send to everybody, and you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like. There's a lot of cities and towns that are currently using this, but I think it's a great opportunity, in terms of the future and just being progressive, being able to be very transparent, not only just in the finance, but just be to show visuals. I think visuals really paint a picture. It also allows us to provide detail. So moving, maybe in a year or two, as we, utilize the software, if people want to see a detail of the budgets, because currently right now, we have appropriations for salary and expenditures. With this budget document, we're able to extract information from our financial software that we use as SoftWrite, and you can see the details. So the detail expenditures by object code, it will allow you to track data over multiple years. You can do org codes, not org codes, you can do org charts if you want to have pictures and people have contact information on staff. But this is something that I wanted to present to the committee as a proposal that we would love to purchase and start using for the next fiscal year.
Madam Chair, I have that video available if you think we have time. Otherwise, it's something we could touch upon at a later meeting. I know the finance director would like to return in December to go over a larger financial plan and snapshot of the town.
It's about 5-minute video. Is that the length?
Correct.
What's the pleasure of the board? We have a somewhat shorter agenda than other agendas tonight, so this might be a good night to take it up. Any objection to that from the board?
No, I'd like to see it, Madam Chair.
Okay, why don't we go forward with it, Mr. Donahue?
And it also allows, residents to have access to view this document online. When they can go into the table of contents, they can click on financial data and it will bring you automatically to that page. And then for people that, are used to having just traditional printed version, we can do that as well. So this kind of gives you an idea of what you can expect and things that we can use in the future. We may just use it just for the warrant articles, but it gives us this other opportunity of growth to show more transparency of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we'll play the video and we'll come back.
right, so this is just an introduction where you have a
Okay.
particular section where you can add supporting information. You have the history of the city, you have demographics, you have organization charts. These are all areas that we can use. We have financial policies. At some point, if we ever were looking at updating our financial policies, it talks about the basis of budgeting. There's a glossary. Within there, you would have the budget process. Usually during the fiscal year, you'll have a calendar, so everyone understands what happens throughout the process from start to finish of when we start working with departments. So this is looking at population overview. These are things that are automatically populated. We have the glossary of terms that can be added to this particular document. If you want to create a new section, we can add a new section. If we want to have a part of the document that talks about COVID impact, talks about the different funding sources, the projects, how we've spent the money. These are all areas that are easy to add in. This is part of the site that not everybody sees. I mean, we'll see it internally, but you can have summaries just looking at the general fund. You can go back you can go back to the 3 years where you can have actual revenue. It will show you all the different sources. You can go back as many years as you want. We also have revenue by fund. So if you're interested in seeing what the revenue sources are for the town, there's different graphs. We can provide historical data. So as you're looking at revenue, we can show revenue by, we have tax revenue, as Bob was saying earlier, the largest percent of our revenue is taxes, but we can show through local receipts where that funding's coming from, what we're receiving from the state. Talks about fund balance. So if you want to have information about the overlay, if you want to have information on your revolving funds, you can have all the sections set up by departments. At some point, if you want to add goals, there's a section where you can add goals. You can have a section for each department where they talk about their mission and what they want to do. So this is where you have goals as we move forward. A lot of cities and towns will have benchmarks for the goals. This is a section that explains the expenditures. So these are they went pretty quickly, but there was a section there that showed the detail. If there's transmittal letters in the warrant that you want to put in, those are all things that can be added. We can add pages for information on ARPA, pages and information on property tax growth. If people are interested in understanding the tax levy and how we come up with the tax levy and what the tax ceiling is, there is a section that talks about this, talks about the budget, talks about accruals and general accounting practices. If you hover over these sections, it'll automatically populate. You can have things listed by departments. We have the mission statement, department description. It's easy if people if we want to add accomplishments, and people can really see what the town is doing. Because a lot of times people are saying, where is my money going? And at least this really shows the picture of, what we're doing and what we're investing money in for the town. If you want to look at debt service, it can show you, how our debt is dropping off. You want to look at OPEB, you want to look at retirement. This is what it will look like when it's actually done. So you have a table of contents. This prints out as a PDF. And you can format this however you want. If you want to have the revenues, you want to show additional detail by fund, by category, by department. There's different graphs that you can put in, so you can customize it based off of how you'd like to present the information to the town.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Paval. That looks terrific.
You're
Any
welcome.
comments on the video or ClearGov?
How much does it cost?
The cost is 8,000. It's around 8,000. It's around $8,000.
Annually?
This
Thank
is
you.
annually, yes.
Yeah, that's what I just want to clarify. Thank you for that. It looks great.
You're welcome.
So is that something that we'd be proposing to add to the FY23 budget and subsequent budgets, just as an operating expense? not
Yes, it
funding it.
would be. Yes, it would be. And it's something, if it had to be spread out within the departments, we could do that as well. But we have ClearGov, we have a contract where ClearGov already for our public facing financials, so this would just be an addition.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Mr. Zulus?
Is there any way to fund it this year? In advance of the, isn't it any way to fund it for the current fiscal year?
I would have to look through the budget, but if this is something that we could fund through ARPA, I'd absolutely put it in as a request. I think that it would addresses the need of being able to allow people access to our financials. They don't have to come into the building to pick up a warrant book. Everything is online. We can keep multiple years worth of the warrants available for people to see. So if that's a funding source, I believe, as I go through the budget at the half of the year, I just see where we're at, see what different savings we have. But this is definitely something that I think we could probably fund in FY 22. So we can move forward with using it going into FY 23.
Mr. Doyle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was along the lines of Mike's, and that is the immediacy of availability funding, including the possibility of ARPA funds. So I support moving on this as quickly as we can. It's a need that the community has had for a very long time.
Okay, so maybe this is something that the Finance Committee could consider with the other ARPA requests, and we'll bring it back on Wednesday night for discussion and possible vote.
That'd be great.
Okay. The next item is the operating budget update.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. In terms, the FY 21 budget is closed. And so I'm still working on the balance sheet. My goal is to have the balance sheet submitted to the Department of Revenue by next Friday. Just have a few items that I'm kind of wrapping up. I've been working very closely with Powers and Sullivan's, who is our outside auditor. I've been hearing that it's about a week to 2 weeks before the Department of Revenue will turn around our certified free cash. So that's what we're really looking at, what our revenue is going to be for FY 23. I'm in the process of updating the tax recap, and that tax recap is going to have everything in terms of the revenue that we brought in from FY 21, what our projections were for FY 22. And I'm also working collaboratively with other department heads. We had our first revenue meeting I would say maybe a month or two ago, and just looking at economic trends, looking at where department heads felt that revenue would be increasing or decreasing, so that as we move forward with putting together the FY 23 revenue projections, we can have at least some, content of why we're proposing a certain, amount or projection in a particular category for revenue. One thing, on November 1st, we had the first department head meeting, which just started the first part of the budget process. And so what departments are they're going to be updating salaries. We're keeping it level funded as for now, and except for anybody that's entitled to a step increase. I've been working very closely with departments in terms of working on time and attendance. This has been something that's come up. So we were able to reconcile all of the sick time and vacation balances for the entire town. We're working on, we have a meeting next week with the payroll clerks to discuss a different accrual form that will keep track of everyone's vacation time their sick time and their personal time. I feel like it's going to be a lot more efficient, and we're also going to be working with SoftWrite, because there is a module in SoftWrite which we have, which will allow sick time, vacation time to be printed on everyone's paycheck. There is training that's involved. Once I meet with the technicians, they have a limited, their staff is very limited. There's 2 representatives in SoftWrite that are available to help with different calls or questions that we have. Sometimes it could be a day, or it could be 8 hours before we get a call back. But hopefully moving forward, we'd like them to come demonstrate this. I spoke to an accountant that works in Easton that's currently using this. So I think I'm excited that this is something that may be an opportunity for us to kind of take a dive at having departments, process their time and attendance in an automated format through SoftWrite. So working on that. Usually in the second week of December, I'll be putting together a budget letter, and that budget letter is going to provide a schedule of what departments can expect and what our expectations are as they start preparing the FY23 budget. I also would like to provide the select board with a financial summary with that, and just as a presentation, so you can see, what happened in FY21, what happened, what were the actuals. I'd like to just be able to present some of that information. If we have to have departments come in and explain some of the variances, I'd like to be able to do that. But I like the select board to have an opportunity to be able to work with departments, hear the projects that they're working on, and just in my past practice, I've set up different schedules that can occur, so that we have enough feedback from everyone before we actually, put together the final FY23 budget. So that's a work in progress, but we're moving forward. We're moving forward with that. So as we get closer, I can, continue to provide updates, and if there's anything that you're interested in seeing, or if I know, Ben, I'm sure you are interested in really being able to look at the details and being able to have things in advance, and to have things, where you have the opportunity to review and ask questions. So I want to make sure that I have that included in the schedule for things that you need within the committee.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Cravallo. That's helpful. And do you want to schedule that for one of the December meetings, or is that too soon?
No, that's not too soon. I mean, for the December meeting, I think it's really important that you have a good understanding of where we are in terms of revenue. Hopefully by then, we would have received our certified free cash. And, I can at least, because, a budget is driven on the amount of money we are bringing. I think that will then allow us to provide feedback to the department heads and how they need to start looking at their budgets. If there are things outside of their current budget that they'd like to have funded, I like to have a process where they get approved before it's added in. But I don't know how you've done things here in the past. I have, a process that I've used for several years. But, we've been trying to set up a collaborative environment within the accounting office, and really allowing, everyone to have, open communication in terms of what your needs are and how you'd like to see things presented. So, if you have suggestions, or if there's a certain way that you'd like to view the information, because everyone likes to see it differently, if you want to let me know, I'll make sure that I can do something so it's very inclusive to everybody's type of style of how they need to or view or process, financial data.
Okay, thank you. In answer to your question, the process that the board has had has changed a little bit, because when we strengthened the role of the town administrator for more authority over day-to-day management of the town, one of the unfortunate side effects of that was that the budgets didn't come through the board for approval the way they always used to. So for years, the board the 3-member board literally signed every budget application. Every budget that was submitted to the warrant committee was signed by the select board members and submitted to the warrant committee and voted at a select board meeting. And then we stopped doing that for a while, but that really meant that a lot of the details of the budget really weren't as well known to members of the board. And then when we expanded to 5 members, we created a finance committee, and the finance committee tended to have the most knowledge of the budget. But I think there's ways where we can improve communication to the full board about the budget. So I mentioned at a prior meeting, I'd like to see us get back to a point where the budgets are coming to the board. If not, it doesn't necessarily have to be for a vote or for signature, but at least so that if there's there's a new capital item that's being sought or a new position being sought, that's kind of called out to the members of the board. Everybody's on the same page and has the same amount of information. So it sounds as though the process you're proposing to us might be a little bit different, but it's going to provide the same information to the board that we've traditionally had. So I think that sounds like a good plan. Any questions or discussion for Ms. Praval? Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question. Karen, you mentioned SoftWrite. Do you think that SoftWrite is a tool that we can use going into the future, or should we be thinking about alternatives?
I think that through you, Madam Chair, I think that SoftWrite has its limitations. There are challenges. Can it provide us with the financial data to get by? Yes, it can. I think Munis is probably a system in the future we may want to look into, but I think it's going to come down to priority. As you look at Munis, there's a lot of applications that are involved. There's a lot of the process. I think the process would take, some time to just get an understanding of what the town really needs for the software, what the implementation process would look like. But I'm definitely a fan of Munis. But to answer your question, Mike, SoftWrite, if it can allow us the ability to print the balances for vacation, sick time, personal days, which has been a challenge. It's been noted in our financial statement management letters. If it can do that, I think that it's something that we could get by using. But as we expand and you're looking for something that's a little more efficient at some point, I think SoftWrite would want to be phased out and moved into software that provides just better reporting. But it's something that we can utilize.
The decision that we made was probably, I don't know, 2014, 2015, to go with SoftWrite, which was the first upgrade in 30 years in the town. That was the decision of SoftWrite over Munis at that time. Was we thought it gave us what we needed, and the cost, it was much more inexpensive. And I think that's still the case, right? Software is not the most expensive. Munis is a little more expensive. So that was in part what drove the decision a few years back, and so.
I think the most challenging aspect that I have with SoftWrite is the customer service and availability of technicians to assist. Because if I need help, or if there's an issue within our accounting office or something goes wrong with printing for paychecks, the availability for customer service or a technician to respond, it's very limited. I mean, we may get a response a day later or 2 days later or 3 days later. You get a ticket and that ticket sits there. So, having a system such as Munis, it eliminates a lot of that. But I think that bringing on Munis is something that needs to be planned and thought out. There's tests, you have to run tests. You have to have 2 parallel systems set up.
Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle, you're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things that might be helpful is in IT, a checklist, a comparative analysis instrument that allows us to take a look at the benefits and liabilities of each of the products. And we've done this in the organization with which I've worked for decades, and there's no such thing as ticket delay. customer service is very important, is a calendar of operational updates. How frequently is the product updated? What are the inputs for updating a product? Who has the wherewithal to have say in that process? And so on down the lines. And there are instruments that allow for those types of evaluations. And maybe our IT department or an external body can provide us with such an instrument so that we can make such a comparative analysis to serve as part of the foundation for a good decision.
Yeah, I think Arthur, that things have changed a bit in the service provider since that analysis was done initially. The company has changed a bit, was sold, and so I think the services aren't the same as they were 7, 8 years ago. So I think it's a good point if we did that, if we did an update on that analysis to see if we'd be better off going with the more expensive option.
And it's an industry that's in accelerating flux.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item or on Ms. Praval's report generally? Mr. Dennehy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, just of all the things that Karen has been working on, and since Karen arrived here in February, there's been a lot of transition. We've had 2 town meetings since then, ARPA, CARES, FEMA, MEMA, and unfortunately, Karen is on top of everything, but unfortunately, they continue to move the field goal posts on her when it comes to ARPA and CARES. And you heard tonight that contact tracing will no longer be covered under FEMA, and expenses that we had put in for to be reimbursed aren't reimbursable anymore. So in addition to that, and policy changes that she's made to procedures so that we don't see an abundance of unpaid bills come in at the end of a fiscal year, the town meeting article that we saw recently in October. Karen is really putting her arms around the town finance. I really want to thank her and her team for all the work she's done since she got here in February. It's overwhelming at times, but just know that Karen is very, very good at multitasking and very good at municipal finance. So thank you for everything, Karen.
Thank you. Ms.
Thanks,
Praval.
Mike. Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to say that I have an amazing team. If it wasn't for the work that the team and the accounting office does in terms of adhering to schedules, working with the departments, we put together a lot of different new procedures. We're looking at, just putting together best practices. And I just have to say that they're amazing. I really enjoy working with them. And then I also want to thank all of the departments. I mean, there's a lot of changes that have occurred over the last 9 months. This would not have been possible without the collaboration and the teamwork of the departments that I work with and the department heads and their staff. I could go on day after day after day about the work and how they have helped me, but none of this would have been possible without their help. So I just want to thank them for, being patient with me and all the emails that go back and forth between our office.
All right. Well, thank you for the report this evening. And so we'll look forward to seeing you at one of the December meetings, or maybe both of the December meetings. All right, we're on to item 8, which is a brief discussion about the role of town departments and elected officials regarding Chapter 40B applications. This is on just for a short update. It's come to our attention that there's still some confusion among residents of the town and those who are interested in some of the 40B applications that are currently pending before the Board of Appeals as to what the role of some of the town department heads and boards is. And we just wanted to clarify that the Board of Appeals is acting in a quasi-judicial role and hearing the applicant's case, but is also assisted not only by Judy Barrett, who's being provided by a technical assistance grant that the town received from Mass Housing Partnership, but also by peer reviewers. And they are experts in the areas of engineering and design, traffic, and those services are being paid for by the applicants, but the peer reviewers are retained by the town. They're under an agreement with the town and they're representing the interests of the town. Various department heads are working with the planning director, Tim Zerwinski, in order to vet the materials that are coming in. Many of these applications have been revised a number of times by the developers, and each time a revision comes through, the fire chief, public works director, the town engineer, other department heads who might have particular expertise, or their department might have some relevance to the issue at hand, are vetting those proposals and providing comments. But the planning board and select board have offered comments on a couple of them. We've weighed in on the Ice House project, and we raised some issues regarding 582 Blue Hill Avenue, which is on for hearing tonight. So this is a different Zoom going on for that case. And we presented some information about the status of affordable housing in the town, and also some comments on that proposal in general. We have not yet submitted comments during the 40B process. We did submit comment letters on all of these at an earlier stage of the proceedings. But the role of the boards and the town departments is really to flag any issues that we think the Board of Appeals should consider, and to be sure that the department heads are reviewing materials and weighing in wherever necessary. So I don't know if any of the other members of the board would like to offer any thoughts on that, but this is just to clarify some confusion that still seems to exist in connection with some of these pending applications. And if not, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the one thing that I might add is that the guidance that we've received is that our comments are supposed to stem from our direct role in the 40B process, which is really upfront during that question of will site plan approval, or not site plan approval, sorry, will the subsidizing agency, right, exactly, and that's really our under our purview, and we've weighed in on those comments. And in some cases like the Ice House, where there's been considerable community process prior on a property, and something like zoning has been passed in the past to try to make sure that that's also addressed. So I just thought that we might want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll go on to item 9. All right, thank you. Then item 9 is a discussion and approval of a contract with BSC Group, Inc. This relates to land surveying services for a parcel of land at the intersection of Blue Hills Parkway and Guile Road. And our town council, Kevin Freitag, has joined us. And I'll ask Mr. Freitag if he would like to update the board on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. Members of the Select Board, you may remember seeing this contract a few weeks ago. This relates to a survey that we would like to conduct at the property that's located at Blue Hills Parkway and Guile Road in relation to a town meeting vote that actually occurred back in 2002. That town meeting vote effectuated a land swap of some of the property up there for part of which used to be conservation land in exchange for a piece that used to be active recreation. That town meeting vote went to the legislature by way of a special act because there was Article 97 land involved, and it was approved by the legislature, but there was never a plan recorded that showed the exact nature of the land that was being swapped. So this contract will allow BSC to conduct a survey, which will end in a plan, which can then be recorded to the Registry of Deeds and clearly show exactly what portions of the parcel that is all owned by the town are only to be used for conservation and are only to be used for active recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Freitag. Any discussion or questions? Mr. Zulus.
And Madam Chair, just to add a little bit more to this, what what drove this and what led to this being uncovered is the proposal by the school building committee, which I'll mention under the potential articles, to do a swap of land that is conservation land. But the land is all behind Brooks Field, and the idea is that one portion of the land the town controls and is not considered conservation land would be swapped for what has been labeled conservation land, because if there is to be a school sited, the land that is currently labeled as conservation land is the better of the two sites, would be the better of the two sites. So as the school building committee and town council looked into this, there was a realization that this particular piece of land had not been recorded, and that this needed to be surveyed again and buttoned up. So that's really what drove all of this, and I can go into a little more detail under the potential articles, but that's really where this came from.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up question, Mr. And I get the intention here. Isn't a small piece of this, a part of this, some Article 97 land as well, that's under the control of the parks? Kevin or Michael, either one of them can answer this. I just remember this, in some preliminary discussions I had heard from the school building committee that part of this might actually be park department land. Am I correct?
Well, oh, go ahead, Kevin. You can go ahead.
I was just going to say that's part of, I guess the short answer is yes. Yes, we believe that Parks has control over some portions of this land. They've certainly been maintaining portions of it, is my understanding. And part of the idea to get this plan on record is to understand more clearly what is what up there, which pieces are conservation, which pieces are.
I got it. Okay, I got it. Very good. Okay, so this actually helps with that, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just to clarify, overseen by parks, but not Article 97 parkland, as would require the legislature and in order to have it be used by the town. But it is under the parks jurisdiction in the town.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zulus.
Thank
Mr.
you, Madam
Wells.
Chair.
Okay, Mr. Wells' hand is down. Okay, and let me just clarify for the record, I am going to be recused on anything relating to the school building project, but in talking with town council, this is something that, while it was discovered during the school building project, or the school building committee's discussions, this is something that needs to be cleared up in any event. So whether the school building project the school building committee rather, ever has any interest in this parcel or not, the survey and the recording issue need to be addressed. So, so do we have if there's no further discussion, do we have a motion then to approve this contract? We have a draft motion.
Yep, Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the contract with BSC Group Inc. for land surveying services for the land at Blue Hills Parkway and Gile Road.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and Ms. Conlon, yes. Okay, unanimous. Item 10, we have deferred until next week's meeting. Item 11, town council is going to remain with us for. This is a discussion and a potential vote regarding the MBTA signage at the stations at Central Avenue and Capon Street. And we have some information from the MBTA relating to these signs. I'll ask Mr. Dennehy or Mr. Freitag if they'd like to give an update. We did discuss this the night of town meeting when we met for an hour before town meeting, and we said we would defer this to this agenda. So, Mr. Dennehy, would you like to introduce this topic?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick synopsis of any resident or commuter who travels on Central Avenue across the trolley tracks heading towards Mattapan or coming from Mattapan, or for that matter on Capon Street, will have noticed some solar-powered flashing railroad crossing signs. This was the topic of a conversation a couple of years ago when a couple of stop signs appeared without the town's traffic commission approval. Many people don't know, but the trolleys have to stop at those crossings. It's mandatory that the trolleys stop. Those stop signs were put up in an effort to try to make it a safer intersection. That's a topic for a different discussion. So a communication had begun between the MBTA and the town about the MBTA potentially installing some signs that would be automatic. When the trolley would approach, these lights would flash. That task was not accomplishable. So as a second step, alternative step, the T installed these flashing, one on the northbound side of Central, one on the southbound side as you enter the crossing near the old Henry's building, and similarly on Capon Street further up where the trolley tracks pass through the public right away. So we didn't not want them. We didn't specifically ask for them. We appreciate the MBTA making an investment in this. What came after that was a document from the MBTA asking the town to own and maintain these signs going forward. There was lots of discussion actually, and a lot of site visits with myself and DPW Director Berkeley and members from the T, multiple teams. And again, the town is very thankful that the T took this step to installing them. Unfortunately, the town is not in the business of railroad crossing signs. We don't have any on hand. Should a motor vehicle hit one of these, or somehow these get damaged in a storm, or just malfunction in any way. So we were somewhat reluctant to enter into an agreement where we would own and maintain these signs going forward. And town council can pick it up from there. He's been working with the T about what in fact the outcome would be if we don't sign this agreement, or if we should sign this agreement, what our obligations are going forward. So that's a brief synopsis of it. It's a bit longer than that, but and just for logistics purposes, as you come south on Central Avenue, that sign is actually on a City of Boston pole. So that would have to be moved closer to the trolley tracks where the town of Milton boundary line exists. So, Mr. Freitag, do you want to add on to anything I may have missed, or conversations that you've had?
Yes, again, Kevin Freitag for the Office of Town Council. So just to pick up on what Mike said, the agreement that you have in front of you suggests sort of two options. The first is that the sign that Mike just described that's not actually in Milton would be moved to Milton, and then Milton would take ownership of the signs and agree to maintain the signs. And the second option is the T comes and takes their signs and leaves. In some discussions today, there was a thought of perhaps a third route, which would be, what if Milton just agrees to take ownership of the signs and isn't subject to any sort of explicit maintenance agreement where it's bound to the MBTA to maintain the signs, but can just decide on its own whether or not, if and when the signs need to be maintained, it will take the steps to do that. So that was a question that I asked of the Assistant General Counsel at the MBTA earlier this evening. And I think hopefully he and I are supposed to have a call at some point tomorrow, at which time I hope we can discuss that potential option. So it gives perhaps Milton a third way here, instead of just the two that were seemingly proposed in the letter that you have in front of you. And that's all the update that I can provide at this time.
Madam Chair, if I might add one thing. So the town has a multitude of similar assets throughout town that we've purchased. This flashing stop signs and the flashing pedestrian crossing signs, there is very minimal maintenance when it comes to that. There is some preventive maintenance that has to take place. But there is a minimal amount of maintenance. They do malfunction. The life of the batteries is still developing technology. It's understood that they can last up to 10 to 15 years. So in a perfect world, the only maintenance on these signs would be replacing the battery on these. But as we've seen with the pedestrian crossing signs and the solar powered stop flashing signs, there is some maintenance involved in this, and I'm just not confident enough that this is something that we could sustain. So, but just thought that's a necessary point to add.
Okay, so the request from the T is what would the town like to do? The T does not want to maintain these signs, and they're asking if we would like to take them and own them and maintain them. The conversation that Mr. Doyle, Mr. Dennehy, and Mr. Freitag and I had this afternoon resulted in that third question, potential option that Mr. Freitag raised, whether we just say leave them there. They're on town. If they're on town poles, we'll leave them there. We may or may not want to maintain them at a future date, but that'll be a decision for the town at a later date. So any discussion? The MBTA would like us to get back to them in the near future as to what the interest of the town may be in these signs. Mr. Zulus.
Well, Arthur had his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Doyle.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Mine is more of a comment, Arthur, and maybe I'll be a little muted if you're diplomatic.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure that if the town assumes responsibility for these signs, that it is not accountable to the MBTA for them in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Mr. Wells has his hand raised, and Mr. Zulus, you had already begun speaking. So,
Michael can go first, Madam Chair.
all right, I'll go to Mr. Zulus and then Mr. Wells.
All right, so some of these questions are rhetorical or may seem rhetorical, but is this something new where the MBTA is coming to cities and towns and saying, here, we're going to put these in your town. Now you're going to be responsible for maintaining them and you own them. Is this being done throughout the Commonwealth? Is this a new program that they're doing? Because, maybe we would do it if they fix the stairs at the T station at Milton Village, which they're long overdue and they have no plan to do. But I guess I don't understand whether this is some kind of new program where the T is trying to offload assets or what. But I don't really understand this. It
Okay,
seems
I think
like
Mr. Dennehy can answer the question because this is, my understanding is this is a unique situation. Mr. Dennehy, can you weigh in on that question?
Yes, yeah, this is a very unique situation, and the conversation, they were very engaging with the conversation. We met at the transportation building back in 2018, myself and my former counterparts in Boston, because Boston obviously is abuts us on the north of Central Ave. And the idea was to try to make the intersection safer somehow. This was a step that the T was going to take to do that. The problem was the delivery of it. These are supposed to be automatic. If you can imagine, when the trolleys approach, they would detonate these flashing Roebucks. When the trolleys weren't engaging, they would be static, right? And you wouldn't see these flashing Roebucks. That wasn't accomplished, and they never really communicated to us that they were going forward with the project, regardless, and coming up with these solar-powered ones. So it's kind of a communication thing, I will say. I do know, and I asked the question that if the town doesn't want to accept these, where will they go? And I don't think they have a home. I think this is one of the first places that they tried to do this. Again, I think public safety was at the forefront of the conversation with the multi-jurisdictional meeting that we had. It's just one of those things that I don't know if there was transition going on what happened, but the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, and quite honestly, we just happened to notice them installed. And the one on Capon Street is actually an infrastructure that they permitted to the Department of Public Works, and it's actually not hanging on a Town of Milton streetlight pole or existing sign pole, but rather it's an investment in an infrastructure that they built into Capon Street. So that's where some of my hesitation came from with owning and maintaining these is if someone should strike, especially that one on Capon Street. Hope that gives a little more clarity to the situation.
Okay, Mr. Zulus, did you have something further?
No, I I still don't know what to think about this, frankly, right? But no.
Okay, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think everyone has valid points here. And I'm wearing an old hat that I wore for many years. This is real. Let's think of the residents of Capon Street. Absent the actions of the T, I think the option 3 that town council has provided is probably a very worthy route for us to take in this. No, they do meet the MUTD. They would be approved if it was something that if it was our traffic commission. And to be honest, it does make it safer for the people who use Capon Street T, and especially the residents who transfers Capon Street daily. So I can live with option 3, and I'm not saying that to say that any of what Mr. Zulus, I think everything else is prudent comments they have want, but for the purposes of 2 stop signs, I think option 3 might be a worthy process to take. Yeah, so thank you. That's just my thoughts.
I think the benefit for option 3 would be that we don't want to have any obligation to replace them or to do any work on MBTA property. But at Central Avenue, my thought is
I concur.
at Central Avenue, we've got the Henry's building going up, and we're gonna have a lot more people right in that area. So I think the signs may serve a purpose, and people have gotten used to them. The flashing signs, I think, do provide some benefit to traffic coming in both directions on Central Avenue and Capon Street. I went out and looked at, and it's not a heavily traveled street, obviously, but it's in the middle of a residential area, and there's probably some public safety benefit to the sign. So if the alternative is that he just takes them and puts them in a closet somewhere and doesn't use them, or we keep them up and we don't have there's no financial commitment here. It's just, hopefully they'll serve a long and useful life have a good public safety purpose, then there's probably no downside to the town in keeping these signs up, so long as we don't incur any financial costs or any long-term obligations that we may not wish to undertake. So it sounds as though town council is going to be having a conversation with the MBTA attorney tomorrow. This may be something we want to table to our next meeting and have a follow-up discussion at that time, once we hear what the response from the MBTA is. Anything further on this, or any other viewpoints or suggestions? Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, if we're talking to the MBTA, if we could tell them that they should fix the stairs at the Milton subway stop, that would go a long way to making us more amenable to anything they want to do at Capon Street.
There's a little quid pro quo there, Council.
We need
I get it.
We need something done.
Everyone shares the sentiment, the need for something to be done at the stairs. Okay, so we'll put this on the agenda for next week.
Only if it can be brief, Madam Chair. We're spending a lot of time over 2 stop signs.
Okay, all right, we'll see how Mr. Freitag's conversations with the MBTA legal department go. All right, then item 12, we do not have the contracts this evening. That this relates to the animal shelter project, and we had on our agenda 2 engineering contracts. Well, 1 engineering, 1 geotechnical consultant. Both Mr. Dennehy and I were at the Animal Shelter Building Committee's meeting this afternoon, at which the project manager, Paul Hogan, gave an update. The RFP has gone out, so there are deadlines coming up on December 14th for subcontractor bids and December 21st for contractor bids. These two contracts would relate more to the construction phase rather than the bidding phase. Although the project manager did say that the first one on the list, LAL Engineering, is probably a little more time sensitive for them than the second one. So the Milton Animal League, which is funding the project, would have to review these contracts as well. And I understand we have a draft that's gone over to their attorney for LAL. I'm not sure whether we have yet submitted anything to the Animal League for KMM. So that one may be on a little bit longer time frame, but hopefully we'll be able to get this on the agenda for the 17th of November for at least the first one, LAL Engineering Group. And if not next week, then at our meeting on December 8th. So, so we'll defer vote on these and more to come at the next meeting. Yeah, if there's nothing else in that item, item 13 is a discussion and potential approval of a special town meeting. We've put on the agenda February 28th as a potential date. I understand the town administrators checked with the moderator, the clerk, and others about their availability on that evening. In looking at the timeline for potential town meeting, early February really was going to be a very quick turnaround for the warrant to be prepared, for articles to be submitted, the publication of the closing deadline. So it looked as though late February was really the only realistic option at this point. The planning board is working on a couple of articles, one relating to accessory dwelling units and one relating to the memory care zoning. And that would really drive the special town meeting. We also have a request from attorney Ned Corcoran, who's representing the owner of 1 Elliott Street, who would like to submit a home rule petition for a liquor license, just because of the long lead time involved in getting that through town meeting, the legislature, before we'd have any authority to be able to issue a liquor license. But that's not time sensitive enough that we couldn't postpone that one until May if we didn't have some zoning articles. So the planning board they had a meeting last night, which they did not take up zoning. They did have a zoning discussion last week. They have a meeting next week on the 17th at the same time as our meeting, at which they're continuing their zoning discussion on those two potential articles. And they're working to try to see if they can get something to us for a closing deadline at which we'll have to decide the time frame of, but probably early December, very early December, and a potential town meeting at the end of February. So the idea was we put it on with the date of February 28th for this board to discuss, considering opening the warrant, scheduling the town meeting, and potential articles that we may have. Mr. Zulus mentioned an article earlier this evening. There's other members of the board may be on committees that are thinking about other articles, but the only one that I was aware of was the liquor license, the home rule petition for a liquor license for Elliott Street. So that's the background on it. And I should just mention one other item. The planning board, because their articles are a work in process, they would not be able to have a public hearing on an article that they submit until sometime in December. And the concern would be that if the public hearing process yields a lot of changes to an article, you run the risk of changes being outside the scope of an article at town meeting, and then that could potentially defeat the whole reason for having a special town meeting. So the planning board would appreciate it if we are flexible in allowing them to submit an article that's hopefully in pretty close to final form, have their public hearing, and if there are changes to the article, reopen and close the warrant so that we could substitute a new article in place of their submission that they might make before the closing deadline. So I wanted to bring that up to our board to see if everyone would be agreeable to exercising some flexibility in this case for the planning board, knowing the short time frame here and the importance and the length of time that they've been working on these articles. So any discussion and any thoughts on this topic? And do we want to schedule a special town meeting? I see Mr. Zulus and Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Zulus. I think what you said made sense, Madam Chair, and I mean, we could go ahead and schedule the meeting. It doesn't mean at this point that we would definitely have to have it. I think we need to keep a focus on the deadlines, which I did see somewhere, to make sure that we can cancel the meeting before we get too far down the railroad tracks, so to speak. Sorry, I have still on Cape.
You just went on mute, Ms. Collins. I don't know if you were finished talking.
No, I'm finished. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. We do have a tentative schedule that the town administrator has put together, which would contemplate us opening the warrant tonight, advertising in the Milton Times. I'd like to see if we can get this, if we decide to schedule a special time meeting tonight, if we could get it into the Milton Times next week for publication on the 18th, so that we would then have a 2-week period. And that would allow us to potentially close the warrant on Thursday, December 2nd, which is not a regular meeting date for us. We could either try to schedule a meeting for that day, or we could close the warrant on December 8th, which is a few days later at our meeting. Right. The only thing we want to be mindful of is the warrant committee process. And if they don't get the articles until mid-December, then they really lose the rest of the month of December during the holidays. And we're into January. So, you know, we could stay with the 8th and just get the draft articles to the warrant committee informally before we actually close the warrant as they come in from the planning board. Or we could schedule a special meeting for perhaps for Thursday the 2nd during the daytime, just to close the warrant. But either way, we're looking at early December in order to meet the timeline. Warrant would have to be in the home 14 days before the town meeting, so we'd have to be in the home by February 14th, which means getting final changes to the printer on or about January 20th. There's probably a little bit of time there. If we only have a handful of articles, it's a little bit less work for the warrant committee than an 8-article warrant or 7-article warrant that we had in the fall, but still they'd be pretty lengthy and involved planning board articles driving the process. Mr. Zulish, you had mentioned a school building article.
Yes, Madam Chair, and just to, initially before that, it seems to me the courteous thing to do for the planning board would be to schedule the town meeting and see if they want to go forward with it. With respect to the school building committee article, the school building committee, presuming that the survey of the land moves forward, I anticipate the school building committee will be, pardon me, ready to proceed with a land swap article. Again, swapping the swap that was described at town meeting by the chair, Sean O'Rourke, between the two parcels behind Brooksfield. And the school building committee would be prepared to go forward, but wouldn't request a meeting just for that. So in other words, if there's no meeting in February, I think the school building committee would go forward with that in May. But if there is a meeting in February, the school building committee, I anticipate, will be ready to go forward with that article.
Okay, so it's very similar to the home rule petition. Okay, anyone else? Any thoughts on a February 28th special town meeting? Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, I did put a feeler out to my department heads early this week. I know that the Department of Public Works is working on revamping the sewer betterment project for Randolph Ave, and they could possibly be submitting one for February special town meeting. And then there was an email that came across from our assistant town planner, Allison Quinn, that the CPA committee may be getting the ball rolling on a potential article, either for a special town meeting or our annual in May.
Okay, so I think then the board may have to consider how many articles we really would want to go forward. I think our focus would be on the planning articles, and they're likely to take an entire night, if not 2 nights, depending, because they are somewhat controversial at the planning board. There's division among the planning board members on these topics, just from watching their meetings or different viewpoints. So it's likely to be a lot of people speaking to the articles at town meeting. But that's good to know that those other 2 potential articles might be out there. We may have more, if we decide to schedule the meeting tonight, then we may have more information for discussion next week. Because we'd have to really decide pretty quickly whether to submit them. The warrant would close either on the 8th of December or earlier. I think if we can get an ad into the Times on the 18th, the warrant, 2 weeks would be February 2nd, December 2nd. So we would have a short window for the public, if anyone from the public wanted to, citizens petitions. Not that we're encouraging any, but we're at least giving notice to the citizens.
So Madam Chair, would you like to entertain a motion to schedule a special town meeting for
Yes.
February 28th and to open the warrant?
Yes,
So I'll make a motion to schedule a special town meeting for February 28th, 2022, and to open the warrant for that town meeting.
I'll second. Melinda as the second.
okay. Seconded by Ms. Collins. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus. Ms. Collins,
I didn't hear it. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes, Madam Chair.
thank you, and myself, yes. Okay. So the schedule that's been drafted, I think it's a good working schedule. Sometimes it's necessary to tweak the printer deadline. Do we want to try to get this in on the 18th? I think we would have enough time. It's basically the same notice that's gone into the Times of prior years. We could probably get that in on Friday to the paper on the 18th. And then what is the board's preference? Do you want to meet on the 8th at a regularly scheduled meeting, or did anyone want to meet sooner than that? We could, I think an option would be for us to meet on the 8th, but try to get the drafts as they're coming into the warrant committee in advance and just let them know we'll be voting it on the 8th.
So Madam Chair, you would set the deadline for the 2nd to get the warrant, to get the articles to the warrant committee by the 2nd. And then we would officially close the warrant on the 8th. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think so. At least yeah, I guess the deadline would really be the 2nd, but we'd be voting to accept the articles on the 8th, but the warrant would.
It may be cleaner just to have a short meeting on the 2nd to close it.
Okay, if that's agreeable to everyone, we could do that
It
during.
may be
the day.
cleaner to do that.
Yes.
Okay, maybe we can schedule that offline. We'll find a time that works for everyone. Okay, so we've identified potential schedule and the articles. Including school building committee and the 2 others that Mr. Dennehy brought forward. Okay, so we'll add this to our agenda for the 17th. Item 14 is a notice that we received from the Boston Gas Company doing business as National Grid. We're going to put this notice up with the board's approval and consent. We'll put this notice from the Department of Public Utilities up on the town website. This is basically notifying the public that National Grid has submitted for approval by the DPU a 3-year energy efficiency plan for the years 2022 through 2024 that would impact residential or ratepayer bills. And that's set forth in the notice, some potential impacts using a certain number of therms of energy. So they're sample and they're hypothetical scenarios, but there are 2 hearings that are going to be conducted remotely, one on December 1st at 7 p.m., which is a Wednesday, and then on Thursday, December 2nd at 2 p.m. These will be conducted remotely for the public to comment to the DPW on this application. And then there's a written comment submission deadline of Friday, December 3rd at 5 p.m. So Mr. Dennehy notified us that we have a couple more notices that have come forward from DPW that we received today. I'm going to put them on the agenda for next week just to make the public aware of them, but we'll put the notices up on the website. And any member of the public may wish to submit written comments, or if interested, appear at one of the Zoom meetings to offer comments verbally. We had a similar situation about a year ago where we had a notice from the DPU about an application, and at that time the board decided not to submit anything officially on behalf of the town, but just to notify residents of the comment period. And we could do the same here unless someone would like the board to weigh in specifically on this matter. Any discussion?
Just a question, Madam Chair, would this only affect those who haven't opted into the energy aggregation plan? Or is that something we need to look into?
I saw some reference to anyone who has another plan. Let's see. Mr. Denny, I don't know if you may be able to speak to that, but I did see something in the notice. It's not sure.
I'm not sure, Madam Chair.
It's not jumping out at me, but I thought I saw something in here that said that if anyone did not already have take part in one of these green initiatives. I think we could check on that, and we could maybe put up on the website maybe a sentence or two to that effect. Is what the impact would be on the energy aggregation program.
Madam Chair, I'll check with John O'Rourke from Good Energy, who's our consultant on this, to see if that is or is not applicable to those who opted into the aggregation program.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. So we'll get it up. Tomorrow is a holiday, so the offices, town hall is closed tomorrow. We'll get it up by Friday onto the website, and those are the dates coming up for December 3rd for written comments, December 1st or 2nd for the virtual meetings. And we'll have a few more to talk about next week. Okay, moving along, it's 9:15. Item 15 is the local regulatory and use agreement relating to 693 711 Randolph Avenue, the 40B proposal. And I will move that we approve the local regulatory and use agreement in substantially the form presented, subject to the approval of the Department of Housing and Community Development, and to authorize the town administrator to sign the agreement.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. And for the public's benefit, our counsel, which is Johanna Schneider of Hemingway and Barnes, has been representing the town in this matter and has been working with the developer pursuant to the land court decision on this item. And we have the draft agreement that we have is subject to DHCD approval. So there are some placeholders, including dates and names to be filled in on the first page. It's a book and page information as well, but this agreement, I understand she has raised, there are still some comments going back and forth, but the idea would be to approve this in substantially this form, which is a form that has been approved in the past by DHCD. So is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes,
Mr. Wells,
Yes,
and Ms. Conlon, yes. Okay, we're on to committee appointments. First one is the Capital Improvement Planning Committee with the Planning Board's representative. Planning Board has nominated Meredith Hall to serve on the Capital Improvement Planning Committee.
Madam Chair, I'll move to, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll move to appoint Meredith Hall as the Planning Board representative to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee.
They gave me 2 shots in my back.
Seconded by Mr. Wells. Thank you. All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus. Yes, Mr. Zulus, you're on mute.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Collins,
yes,
Mr. Wells,
yes,
and Ms. Conlon, yes. Municipal Broadband Committee.
Madam Chair, I move to appoint the following to the Municipal Broadband Committee: Joseph Chamberlain, Mark Day, John Sullivan, Robert Lynch Jr.
second,
Seconded by Ms. Collins, and these are one-year appointments, as was the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. All in favor of the motion, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus. You're on mute.
Yes.
Mr. Yes. Thank
Yes.
you. Collins,
yes,
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Myself, yes. Sign Review Committee, and I just want to note for the public's benefit, we have a vacancy on this committee. Ray Thill, who served for a number of years and had a lot of expertise in the sign industry, is stepping off the committee. So thank you to Mr. Thill for his years of service. John Zikowitz, who's the chair, has asked that we try to seek someone who might have some experience in installation or design of signs. For this committee, we have submitted the charge for the committee and the notice of the vacancy to the Equity and Justice Committee and asked them for some assistance in identifying a good candidate for the committee. And Mr. Zikowitz is also reaching out to Mr. Thill to see whether he might have any suggestions for someone who would be a good fit for the committee. We have 5 members to appoint, but 1 vacancy. For anyone watching, if you're interested in the sign review committee, you can look at information on the town website or contact the select board office for information.
You make sure to mention the pay, Madam Chair. Post the money on that.
The pay, volunteer position for all of us, right? So it's not, you're not in it for the pay if you're looking to serve on a town committee.
We all know the fringe package that goes with this.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move that we appoint John Zikowitz, Douglas Cybeck, Lawrence Johnson, Paul Doherty, and Tim Zerwinski to the Sign Review Committee. And I think that's also a 1-year appointment. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Thank you.
we have a second.
Second,
All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, we have meeting minutes for October 27th and November 1st.
Madam Chair, I move the approval of the meeting minutes for October 27, 2021 and November 1st, 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Collins. There was one, just as I put it in the nature of a typo that Ms. DiNapoli and I talked about, and at the very end, now that we're listing documents, it says additional documents, but it should just say documents. So we're gonna, with that, if it's agreeable to the board, we'll take out the word additional and approve these in the form.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mr. Doyle's already moved approval and, but I think
Okay.
if everyone's agreeable to that, then we can vote on the motion. Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, I just have one suggested amendment to the October 27th minutes under item 13, about halfway down. The sentence starts with misinformation. And the add would be that resident concern was raised about misinformation in slides, etc. So the ad would be resident concern was raised about. I believe that's what I was trying to say. If whether I said it or not, I think I did. That's what I was trying to.
Okay, so we're adding the words at the top of page 5, or third line, we're adding the words resident concern was raised about prior to the word
Yes.
misinformation. Okay. Actually, I just realized if we could vote these separately, I know Arthur, you made the motion to approve both of them. I was not at the November 1st meeting because it's a fire station building committee. I'm recused on that one. If we could vote these separately, I probably should abstain on voting on that one.
Okay. I'll split them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So you'll revise your motion to just be the October 27th minutes?
That is correct.
Okay, with those changes agreeable to everyone? Mr.
Yes.
Okay, then all in favor of the minutes of October 27th as amended tonight? Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
And now, Madam Chair, I will move to approve the meeting minutes of November 1st, 2021.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells, Mr. Wells, you were on mute, I think, when you responded. You're on mute now. Oh, I think we just lost Mr. Wells. Okay, well, he may have tried to vote. We didn't hear Mr. Wells's vote, but I'm going to abstain. So then I think we should call that 3-0-1. 3 yeses and 1 abstention. Okay, town administrators report, Mr. Dennehy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of housekeeping type things, all public works related, so I'll take them a little bit out of order. So recently the town launched its Recycle Right Milton app. This app is designed to help residents ensure their proper disposal of all household goods. It allows them to program the curbside collection, and you'll notified via text or email. It provides you with updates about weekly schedules. For instance, this week, tomorrow and Friday's collection days are delayed 1 day. So Thursday's route will be picked up on Friday, and Friday's collection route will be picked up on Saturday due to our Veterans Day holiday observance. This app would account for that and would let the user understand that. It notifies you of special collections or events that are going on. Last Saturday, we had the DPW Recycling Day. You'd get a notification about that. It's available through all the app stores, both Apple and Android devices. It's very useful. So I'm just reminding the residents the ability to download this app. It puts your collection calendar and disposal guide on your phone for you and notifies you weekly when things are coming your way. To that point, we really appreciate our yard waste collection company. They've extended our yard waste collection schedule, the curbside program. This would have been an off week for the town. They've decided that they're going to collect yard waste on the regularly scheduled days from now until December 3rd. So there'll be no weeks off from now until then, understanding that there's a lot of leaves that have fallen recently and a lot still to fall. They're going to collect it every week, which is a huge advantage for residents that don't have to wait that 2-week period to get stuff collected. So we appreciate the work of Boston Carting Services to do that for us. So I just remind people to try to download that Recycle Right app, and want to remind the people on Thursday and Friday route that their trash is delayed 1 day this week, and just notify the entire town that yard waste will be collected each and every week on your regularly scheduled day through December 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. Chair's report. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, and we have a Veterans Day program that will be held at 11:00 a.m. at the town gazebo, organized by our Director of Veteran Services, Kevin Cook, and I'm sure the American Legion Post and others have helped organize this event, and we hope members of the public will attend. There's not going to be a parade this year, just as we did not have a parade on Memorial Day, but everything will be held on the town green at the gazebo. We have a featured speaker, Colonel McCarthy, who is a U.S. Army, also professor in the Strategy and Public Policy Department at the U.S. Navy War College, Strategy and Policy Department. And we're going to be highlighting the Purple Heart community and veterans who have received Purple Heart. So Kevin Cook has been spending some time on that aspect of the ceremony. There will be some music provided by the marching band and a reading by the Project 351 ambassador, along with some remarks by clergy members and other speakers. So it's always a nice event on Veterans Day, and we hope that as many people as possible will attend it in person or watch it on television. MATV usually televises it live and also replays the ceremony. It's always a nice event. Mr. Doyle has his hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might be an appropriate time to acknowledge the excellent work that Christine and Kevin did in today's luncheon for our veterans that was held at the Council on Aging. It was outstanding and superb presentation by the executive officer of the USS Constitution, along with a flag detail from the Constitution. Couldn't have been a nicer event.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. And I understand everyone, I was not able to attend. I was in Boston all day, but I understand many members of the board, I think all of the other members of the board dropped in at some point and were able to attend at least part of the ceremony. So, or the luncheon event, I heard it was quite nice. And Mr. Dennehy was also present, and there were some pictures up on the Facebook page for the Council on Aging today. So looks like a very nice event and good way to start the Veterans Day observance. So thank you to the COA. So a good program for tomorrow. The other item that we've added under 19B, which is topics that the chair did not reasonably anticipate would be discussed, is a one-day liquor license application that we received just yesterday from the Milton Arts Center. They are requesting a one-day liquor license for Saturday, November 13th. And this came in, as I said, just yesterday. It was not included in our agenda when we posted it on Monday, came in within the 48-hour window during the posting period. As we all know, tomorrow's a holiday, town hall is closed. If we wanted to try to schedule a special meeting for Friday, we would not have sufficient time in order to post the meeting notice. So we consulted with our town council to verify that we would be able to act on this item tonight. Town council referred us to a couple of decisions, one from 2013 involving the Ashby Board of Selectmen and one from 2017 involving the Kingston Board of Selectmen. In the latter case, both of them involved liquor licenses and late. One of them was a late request. And in the Kingston case, the AG's opinion indicates that a late request for a liquor license does come within the nature of an emergency. So if we fit the criteria for acting on this evening, in particular, because it's really not possible to schedule a meeting for Friday and have a 48-hour posting. We did amend our notice earlier today to add this to the agenda so that it is on the public agenda. And I also reached out to the Arts Center. Their letter indicates that they were not sure whether their event on Saturday evening, which is a comedy event, was going to go forward. And so this was a kind of a late request for them, and also not a late getting it into our office. I did ask that in the future they try to give us 2 weeks notice so that we can get these onto an agenda. But town council is comfortable that we're able to act on this evening based on the AG ruling and also the holiday tomorrow and our inability to schedule another meeting prior to November 13th. So the request is for Milton Arts Center, November 13th, for a storytellers and comedians event, which I believe is a fundraiser.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve a special one-day liquor license for the Milton Arts Center for November 13, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells. I think we may have lost Mr. Wells. I saw him come back, but I think we've lost Mr. Wells' connection again. And myself, yes. Members' reports. Thank you all. Do we have any members' reports this evening?
Not this evening.
Madam Chair, just to add on the Veterans Day theme, in addition to the great event today and tomorrow's events, after tomorrow we will be a Purple Heart community, and our Purple Heart community signs, we have about 20 of them, I believe, that will be posted around town near the speed. I guess they're going to be posted near the flashing speeding signs, I think. And so that we can look, residents can look for that after our officially becoming a Purple Heart community tomorrow. Members can look for those signs to be popping up around town, hopefully soon thereafter.
Yes, that's exciting. Ms. Collins.
No, I just have a couple things under community happenings, Madam Chair.
Okay, I don't see Mr. Wells back. So why don't we, well, next was public comment response. We did not have any public comment this evening. Future agenda items. If anyone has anything, we have a short time to get our agenda posted for next Wednesday. So please let Mr. Dennehy or Mr. Napoli or myself know by Friday. Community happenings then, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, tomorrow, being sponsored by Sustainable Milton, there's it's kind of a rally, I guess, of sorts in front of First Parish Church. The 11th hour, it's to get community spirit behind activism on climate change and doing what we can. And then on Saturday, November 13th from 2 to 4, there's a panel discussion related to Deborah Milbauer's current exhibit at the library. It's really great if people haven't seen it, the Milton Family Portrait Project. And I believe, Madam Chair, you actually also have seen it. So yes, so there'll be a panel discussion, and I think it'll be really interesting. So I just wanted to highlight those. Thank you.
It is a good exhibit at the library. I'm not sure how long it's running, but I think there's still a fair amount of time left for people to go up and see it. So that sounds good. Any other community happenings in addition to those important events? Okay, we have no executive session this evening. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes, and I forgot to say the Sustainable Milton event is at 6 tomorrow p.m.
6 o'clock. And myself, yes. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all. 9:37, not too bad. I thought it would have been shorter tonight, but you never know.